always been fascinated with the tabernacle, because to me it has shown a desire of God to always want to be with his creation, to want to be with his people. He wanted to be with us at creation, and then things just went haywire over there. Then he wanted, so then he left he couldn't commune with people. Then in the wilderness, he again wanted to be with the people, but he wanted the reverence, the necessary reverence and respect. And so he has the tabernacle built again. And then again, as time went on, those ideas also, that also fell through. But with the tabernacle, I think we get a great idea of how God does want to deal with us, and the ideas, like how specific he is with everything, which I'm hoping to share with you today, is to show you he is a God of order, and he's a God of structure. And if we follow that order and structure, everything is beautiful. But if you don't, then all of a sudden, even the whole tabernacle could fall apart. So hoping to share some of my excitement with you, sharing you some pictures. And as I say, I'll definitely share with you where I have questions with the artist depiction of things as well, and where I haven't found answers myself in the scriptures. So first of all, looking at the tabernacle, this is kind of what it would have looked like. Israel traveled through the wilderness, and then when the cloud stopped, or the flame stopped, the pillar of fire stopped, that is where they would set up their the tabernacle. The tabernacle there's a tabernacle at Mount Sinai, and you can see there's order, there's structure. It wasn't just haphazard people putting their tents up wherever they wanted to. And at the center of all of this would have been the tabernacle, in the midst of all the camp, which is something where God wanted to be. He wants to be in the midst of the camp. That is a depiction of the pillar of cloud covering the camp at night, in the daytime, and in the nighttime they would have had the pillar of fire. I need to find which button is going to move me. There we are. That structure that you saw, if you want to go and read more about how the Israelite camp was laid out, you can go and read it in Numbers chapter 2 and chapter 3. It kind of gives you a whole list of names and numbers and things that we always kind of, that names and numbers again, I can hardly pronounce them, I can hardly say the numbers. And we kind of jump through these chapters where actually if you just make time to read them, you can get quite a good idea of how structured God actually was in everything he did. So when they put the tabernacle down, it always had the door to the east. So the entrance to the tabernacle was always facing the east. Then in front of the door of the tabernacle, you can see there, if I move my arrow there, can you see it on your screen? Okay, there you would have had Moses and the high priest and their sons. They would have stayed just in front of the door of the tabernacle, keeping the gate, as they said. And then you would have had your three tribes of Issachar, Judah, Zebulun, and Issachar, Judah, and Zebulun, the three. Leah's three children. Not even Rachel's, not the favorite, right? Leah, three children. Then on the north side of the tabernacle, you would have had, so all around the tabernacle, you have the Levites staying closest to the tabernacle, kind of forming a second barrier. So you couldn't just come to the tabernacle anytime you wanted to. So you have the families of Merari, they were Levites, Gershonites, and the Kohathites, all children of Aaron. But on the north side, we would have had the tribe of Dan, the tribe of Asher, the tribe of Naphtali. Those were the children of the servants. On the west side, you would have had Ephraim, Manasseh, and Benjamin. Rachel's 3 children were camped together on the west side of the tabernacle, and then on the south side we had Gad, Simeon, and Reuben, Leah's and Zilpah, who was Leah's servant, those tribes. So very ordered, very structured. They all had their own flag. They all had their own, you could almost say like their own little towns in the areas that they were. But just to give you an idea of what you would have seen this, all these brown tents, and then suddenly in the middle of all of this was this white wall. Can you see the other tents haven't got walls around them? Only the tabernacle had this white wall, but yet the tent of dwelling, the tabernacle where the holy place and the most holy place was, the top covering was brown as well. So it looked exactly like the brown tents that were outside the tabernacle. So, you know, in contrast to a lot of churches nowadays where the leader of the church or the pastor or the apostle, as they're calling themselves, they have all the smartest clothes and this elevated position. God is just showing by his own dwelling place that, yes, I am special, but I am still wanting to be, not stand out away from everyone else. You would also, I think a good thing to have is get an idea of the size of the tabernacle, because I think often we think the tabernacle is this huge place where actually the whole tabernacle I'm talking about now, so with the white tent fence around it included, you can see it's the size of 4 tennis courts. Or if you don't know what a tennis court size is like, you can look at a soccer field and you can actually fit 4 tabernacles on one soccer field. So it is not this enormous building. It's and it's not that impressive either. But yet it had major significance and influence on so many people's lives. If you looked at the smaller tabernacle in the inside, the most holy place and the Holy of Holies, I've taken a Ranger or a double cab bakkie because that's a very common car in South Africa. Literally, if you bought yourself 27 bakkies and you parked them 3 down and 3 wide and 3 up, so you would have had a 9 by 9 grid in a way, you would know that's the size of the holy place and the most holy place. So also, again, not huge. It was quite a small structure for the amount of work and things that happened there. Well, at the bottom there, I've shared in, especially if you're using the King James or the New King James Version, there's the measures and weights are in shekels and minas and talents, and they talk about a cubit and a span and a palm and a finger. And these things have caused challenges over the years to find out like the exact measurements of things, because, for example, a cubit, you can see the holy place and the most holy place was 10 cubits by and 20 cubits. So a cubit was the length from your elbow to your fingertip of the high priest at that stage. So this would have been Moses' elbow to his fingertip, and they would have measured that length, and that would have been the length of a cubit at that stage. On average, it kind of worked out to about 45 centimeters or 450 millimeters, so just short of a meter. A span was your outstretched hand, so you held your hand like this, and that was your span. Your palm was your width, and your finger was the width of a person's finger. They didn't have measuring tapes, and Henry's using all kinds of lasers nowadays to do his measurements. It was very, very basic and simple. But we're not talking about an enormously huge structure. So there again, I've given you a picture of the layout of the tabernacle. And in a sense, I'm going to quickly speak of a summary before we're going to look at the individual items in the tabernacle, because just the layout of the tabernacle is already very important. Your outer court is this area over here where the brazen altar and the laver were. So this area here. Your holy place is the first entrance, and your most holy place is the second entrance of the tabernacle. But look at the progression. In your outer court, many people can enter. So you came in there to offer your sacrifices. In your holy place, few entered. Only the priests were allowed in there. And in the Holy of Holies, only the high priest was allowed to enter there. So this could be representative of the ecclesia, the outer court. Then the holy place would be individual service in your own relationship we have with God and Christ. And most holy place is what I believe is going to be when we have kingdom time. So let's come to some nice bigger words. Reconciled. Here we get reconciled with Christ, and there's a reference there, Romans 5. Here we get reformed by the table of showbread and the lampstand. And here we are exalted when it is kingdom time. So again, look at just the progression. Yeah, we get separated from the people of the world because we wanted to come and offer sacrifices. Here in the holy place, you're going to see it's an area of dedication. And in the most holy place, because it's referring to kingdom time, we're going to be glorified. Moving into the tabernacle, outer court, as soon as we came in there, our minds are going to be changed. And we can read that in Philemon. Going into the holy place, we have changed characters, leading to changed bodies. We have mental preparation, leading to moral application, leading to physical perfection. So in a sense, this you can see is how this is our walk in the truth. It's our own personal path that we are following. And this is why I found the study of the tabernacle so exciting, because we all want to move from a state where we were in the world, we're wanting to have our minds changed, work on changing our characters so that we can lead to changed bodies. We all would like to be glorified in the kingdom. And I think as we look through the different implements and the different structures in the tabernacle now, we actually will be able to see how that happens. So first place we get to is this outer court. And this we read of in Exodus 27 and Exodus 30. So you came to the tabernacle and it had this white wall, but it had a courtyard gate with the 4 pillars. First thing you saw as you went through this courtyard gate would be the brazen altar of burnt offering, and then you would see the bronze laver. So let me come down here again. Looking at the courtyard fence. So now remember, it had these pillars. You're going to start seeing the progressions, and at the end I'm going to summarize even more progressions. They had these pillars. Everything had to be transported, so couldn't have these massive brick structures. So all the pillars, as I've said, were made of acacia wood overlaid with bronze. They couldn't be solid, because if it was a solid structure, it would have been very heavy. But they had silver hooks and they had silver fillets. And then they had these curtain rails that were attaching one pillar to the next, on which they could hang the curtains or the white linen cloths. And then they had the bronze tent pegs, which held the pillars upright in the desert. I personally feel the courtyard gate wasn't like one continuous structure with the courtyard fence. I actually think it might have just been moved slightly forward so that you could come in on the sides. Otherwise, you would be constantly opening and shutting or lifting up and down the curtain fence. But if it was just slightly forward, you would still be able to get into the courtyard of the tabernacle. The courtyard gate had the special curtain, and you're going to see that the doorway into the veil also has a very similar structure to what was on the outside. So I think God's showing a lesson there, that he's giving us a glimpse of the holies, but like way outside, even in the start of our walk in the truth. As you come in now through that door, as I said, the first thing you will see is this brazen altar. It was also hollow, so it looked like a massive, in South Africa, we would call it a braai or a barbecue, with a grate on the top on which they would put the animal, and the fire would be below it over here. Was totally overlaid with bronze. It was a perfect square, so 2.3 meters by 2.3 meters, and I worked out it's the size of a small study, someone's bedroom, or like a dining room table, biggish, like an 8-seater dining room table, and it was 1.4 meters high, so it was actually quite high. The fire was not allowed to go out. That fire had to burn all the time. You would come in with your animal sacrifice, which was always sacrificed on the north side. Interesting fact. The Bible doesn't give any reason why, but you would come and your sacrifice would be checked, and then they would actually kill the animal using bowls and shovels to catch the blood, because the blood would have to be thrown onto these horns at stages. They had a whole ritual that they followed. And then those animals, whether it was a bull or a cow or a goat or a dove, would then be burnt here on top of this grid. Now, can you imagine one of these priests trying to pick up a whole ox and put it on top there? They would really struggle. So God said he'd allow them to build a ramp. They weren't allowed steps. And in Ezekiel we read that they weren't allowed the steps because then the people you would see their nakedness. So they were allowed a ramp to go higher so that they now could put the animal on top of the grid. When we have a chance to look at the different sacrifices that were offered, and then the link to the different feasts, you will see that the priests were also allowed at this stage to keep some of the animals' bodies, parts of their bodies, in order to have a meal with that. They had various other little implements around to keep the fire going, but the one thing that was very important is they had a fire pan, which when the camp moved, they would catch some of the coals and put them in this fire pan so that the fire never stopped burning. They would literally have fire coals ready to set the fire alight again from when they stopped at their next resting place. The next thing you would have seen would be the bronze laver. Now, isn't this interesting? The laver also made from bronze, but it specifically said it was made from the polished mirrors of the women that served at the tabernacle. Now, the women would have had a major role to play in the service in the tabernacle, whether it was helping with the sewing of the curtains, the embroidery. They would have helped bake the bread. They would have helped clean the implements. So they were quite involved. I found it really interesting that they had this part to play with the laver, bronze laver, being made from the voluntary offering from the women who and they made this laver from it. So this was, oops, I went one too far ahead. It was circular. When you're in Exodus, it doesn't tell us what the shape of the laver was. We have to go and see that in 1 Kings when Solomon built the temple. It talks about a round structure. There is very little information actually given about the bronze laver, but it had major importance. And that's a study that Lundy shared with us about washing of the hands. If you want to go and just look at that Bible study again, here it would actually enhance what I'm going to share with you here, because the priests were told they had to wash their hands and their feet before entering the tent so that they did not die. God is like, and he keeps saying that they die not. So very important to God that before they could go in to meet with him in the holy place, they had to wash not just their hands, but they had to wash their feet as well. So a suggestion I'd like to make is, so far what we've got the tabernacle where we're coming in to offer a sacrifice, that the brazen altar and the sacrifice we're offering is when we get baptized, and that the laver is speaking about the breaking of bread. A lot of people think that the laver could, because there's water associated with it, it's the baptism of it. But if you think of it, they kept on having to wash their hands and feet. It wasn't like a whole underwater experience. And it could speak of rededication, redevoting your life, consciously being aware of the things you do and the places you've gone that could have been contrary to what God has expected from you. Now, from the two implements or the articles that are outside the tent area, we're going to move into the tent. So the first thing you're going to see is those 4 different coverings of the tabernacle. The first covering was made of fine twined linen, embroidered with cherubim and palm trees, which white we always associate with righteousness. That would have been very, it would have just provided a covering, like a sheet. So over that, you put the goat's hair covering, and the Bible gives specific dimensions of these things and how long each strip must be. And an immediate link one has there is with the scapegoat. And that story you can read about in Leviticus 16. But that also wouldn't have been totally waterproof. So even though it didn't rain much in the wilderness, there was dew, and it did rain at stages, and their preparation had to be made for that. Then the next thing was the ram's skins dyed red, which in Leviticus 8 says it speaks of consecration, and this would have already started now providing both heat and providing waterproof. And on top of that, the Bible talks about badger skins. Now, if you go and look, it's a very bad translation, because there would not have been badgers in the wilderness, but they show quite, studies have shown quite convincingly that it's most probably a sea cow, some kind of water animal that, so it's like a porpoise skin that they put over the top part that gives it that gray, brown, unattractive color. And if you look at that reading in Isaiah 53 verse 2, it's where it says that Jesus was not a pleasant person to look at. So all of the things in the tabernacle refer to Jesus. It's amazing how you can pick up. Now when you read other verses in the Bible, you're going to suddenly think, oh, but that's what the tabernacle spoke about. Or even in the New Testament, it's really exciting to see how these things come together. A Bible that's written by so many different authors, but the same idea, the same theme comes through, and it just shows how true the Bible actually is. Once we go through the coverings, now we want to come into the holy place. Now, to come into the holy place, you had to first go through a door which had 5 pillars. As you went through this door, to your left would be the lampstand, in front of you would be the altar of incense, and to the right of you would be the table of showbread. I'm sure a lot of you already can hear in your brain, lampstand, light, I know verses about that. Table of showbread, bread, I know verses about that. An altar of incense, we all have got many links to the word incense in the Bible. But I want to show you how tiny these things actually were. First of all, let's have a look at the door. So now the door has 5 pillars. Why did it not stay by 4? Well, Jesus says, first of all, I am the door in John 10 verse 9. But maybe the 5 pillars now is either referring to the Torah, so Genesis to Deuteronomy, or it could be referring to the other epistle writers, that there were 5 specific epistle writers, Paul, Peter, James, John, and Jude. And this is where like deeper spiritual, I'm just throwing this idea out there, but you can get spiritual lessons from that as well. Like, interesting question is just, why didn't it stay? If a 4 door was big enough, 4 pillar door was big enough for the entrance to the tabernacle, why suddenly now move to 5? You're going to see now, remember I spoke about progression. You're going to see now that bronze metal is not used anymore. Bronze or the brass was only used in the outer court. The minute we come to this structure, we're moving to silver or to gold. The tabernacle structure had these boards which held it up. So it was acacia wood covered in gold, but their feet were in sockets of silver. I personally believe here, this is where I start questioning some of the pictures that are brought across, and Harry Whittaker has got a couple of good arguments regarding the boards as well, that they couldn't have been made from solid gold because they were big, and that would have made them very heavy. And if they were also solid planks, you would have talked about a wooden building and not a tent. And the tabernacle is always referred to as a tent. So just an idea that we're putting out there, that I would actually rather think of these boards as something like a ladder, like a framework, that it was the acacia wood that was covered in gold, and then the feet of the ladder would fit into these silver sockets at the bottom. One of the reasons I like that argument or that discussion is, remember that first cloth that went over was white linen cloth embroidered with cherubim. Now, if that was covering a solid wood structure or a solid gold structure, you wouldn't see the cherubim on that linen cloth on the side by the walls. But if it was more something like a ladder, you would have this picture of the cherubim coming out between like the frames of the boards. But that's just an idea. I bet it's not very specific in the Bible. So, you can make up your own picture that you would like to view. What we do know is that these boards were connected with 4 horizontal bars to keep them together and to keep them straight. And then the Bible talks about a center ridge pole. Now you can read the word center. This has caused quite a lot of problems because some people think, was it another pole that went down the middle of this whole framework on this side? Or could center possibly mean in the middle of the tabernacle itself, so that it actually gave the tent a bit of a V shape, so that if it, then the tent itself wouldn't be sagging with the weight of the other coverings. Again, can't be very specific about it. The only thing that's very definite is it was acacia wood covered in gold, and everything was in silver sockets, which kept the whole structure up. Remember, I said the first thing you see is the table of showbread on your right-hand side as you go in. Now, the little table was 92 centimeters long. So those of you who work with school children, that's 3 rulers, which is not very big. That long, 46 centimeters, so it's a ruler and a half wide, and only 69 centimeters high. So it was very low down, very close to the ground, as depicted in that picture. The important thing was that every Sabbath, the priests would come and they would put 12 unleavened cakes on the table of showbread, which represented the 12 tribes. They also had to have frankincense either burned over the cakes or they had frankincense around it. When this table of showbread was transported, it was covered in a blue cloth, as I showed you with my previous class where I talked about why the sky is blue and it's such a beautiful color. But can you see on the table of showbread, we have bread and we have wine, a way to rededicate and read about our lives. On our left-hand side, as we went in, you would see the lampstand. Now, the lampstand was, one thing it says is it's all gold of one beaten work, so one structure. It was 1.5 meters high, so that's a kind of about an average woman's height, and 1 meter wide. Now, a lot of the pictures that are in magazines and in encyclopedias have based their idea of what the lampstand looks like. It's often called a candlestick, but there were no candles in the tabernacle. There were only lamps, so it's a translation error there. But they looked at this when the ark, when the temple was plundered, and this relief was found on the wall, and it was drawn flat like that. But they try to depict what the hexagonal base. So two-dimensional kind of picture. The lampstand, when you read more about it, it was intended to represent a tree, like a tree of life, because what has it got? It's got a trunk. It's talking about a tree. It's got 6 branches. There are 70 ornaments according to Josephus, and those ornaments are flowers and fruit. And the fruit, it says specifically, are almonds. These are almonds. I've just shown you pictures there of almonds from Israel. There were buds or knops in the King James, and there were bowls, which is where the lampstand was. And it had this hexagonal base, a 3D shape. I would like to suggest that the lampstand didn't actually look like that. It wasn't a flat structure, that it was possibly more a circular structure like this, that it actually represented a tree with each of the branches coming out like over the hexagonal base. Because why have an hexagonal base, with 6 corners, and then have a flat structure on the top? To me, that kind of picture in my brain is just more representative of a tree, representative of fullness. If we take the trunk representing Christ in the center of all the lights, whereas the way that it's depicted in this picture, Christ is just actually in the center of 2. Just my ideas, but we can discuss your feelings about that as well. The lamps were never allowed to go out either, and they would have been the only source of light in this in the holy place. They were burnt with a high quality olive oil. And I'm sure by now you've already thought of verses about lights and lamps, where Jesus says, I am the light of the world. That is in John 8, verse 15. And God's word is a light unto our feet. That's Psalm 119, verse 105. So can you see how, as you read in scriptures now, your mind can jump back to the tabernacle and think, that was in the tabernacle. It shows how God wants us to live our lives. It's so consistent all the way. Then in front of you was the altar of incense. Now the altar of incense, again, was acacia wood covered in gold. It was the tallest structure in the holy place. It was 92 centimeters high, but it was 46 centimeters by 46 centimeters wide. So it was a perfect square on a rectangle. Lilandi will know the exact word that I'm wanting to find there, but I cannot think of it. Couple of rules with regards to the altar of incense. They had to burn incense twice a day, with the morning sacrifice and with the evening sacrifice. And in Exodus 30, God gives a specific formula how that incense was to be made. But isn't it interesting that salt was always included in the making of the incense? And as I say later here, incense is symbolic of prayer. And that we can see in Revelation 5, verse 8. But in Colossians 4, verse 6, we read, let your words always be seasoned with salt. Isn't that interesting? Let our words, let our prayers always be seasoned with salt. The flames from the incense altar came from the brazen altar. So a priest would come from outside with some coals and put them inside the incense altar, on which they would then burn the incense. And I do think that one of the main reasons they would have wanted the incense to give off a pleasant aroma is, now imagine, outside they are burning animals, You've got the smell of blood, you've got the smell of meat. So very interesting smells that come from there. And this would have killed all those smells. So just making, other than having the symbolism of prayer, it would have also had a practical function as well. From the holy place, we go into the Holy of Holies. Now, the Holy of Holies was 10 cubes by 10 cubes, perfect square. Look at this, we are back to 4 pillars. So can you understand, why didn't it stay 4, 4, 4? Why did it go 4, 5, 4? I love numbers, and I find that interesting. So we have the veil. Then inside, behind the veil, we had the Ark of the Covenant, just one item inside the Holy of Holies. And inside the Ark of the Covenant, we had 3 articles, the manna, the rod, and the tables of stone. So let's have a look. First thing, we have the veil. Now, I'm sure immediately, what are you going to think of? You can think of that verse about Christ. But let's have a look at the structure of the veil. It was also made from this white linen with figures of cherubim woven into it. And the colors they are mentioned, the blue, the purple, the scarlet, and the white. It was a handbreadth thick. So it wasn't just one single cloth. It was very, very thick. There's actually one study that said when they washed the veil, they needed 300 priests to be able to carry it. That's a lot of people to work out and carrying on this veil. It was hung. Now we are just moving more. You can see things are just becoming gold. It's got gold, but the silver sockets at the bottom here. Possibly the 4 pillars here could be representing the gospel writers, because they're the ones that tell us the most about Christ, his life, his purpose here on earth. But if you look at the main dimensions of the veil and you try and stretch it out, it actually does not cover the tabernacle from wall to wall. There is a gap left on either side, which means that the priest or the high priest, which could go through that door once a year, could just walk through there, because when he went through there, he would be carrying a censer with fire. He would be having perfume. He would have blood that he is carrying in his hands. So if he had to now either duck down underneath this heavy curtain, it could have been disastrous. Solomon's temple also, when he made the most holy place and the holy place, he actually has 2 doors in his temple leading into the most holy place. And the one thing that we specifically know about the veil is at Christ's death, which is in Matthew 27, it tore from the top to the bottom. Now, can you imagine something that's a handbreadth thick and so high, tearing from the top to the bottom? It shows that it had to be from God. It could not have been man that just went there with a knife or a scissors. Absolutely difficult. But for us, the symbolism is that now we have free access through Christ into the presence of God. And you can read about that in Hebrews 6 and in Hebrews 10. And isn't it interesting? Verse 19 and 20, both same verses, the 2 chapters. Once you've gone through the veil, you are going to see the Ark of the Covenant. Now, can you see the boards here in how they depicted in this picture? This is how I believe it was more likely to be, that you could actually see the curtain between the boards. I would not have had solid boards. Mine would have been more, as I say, like a ladder is the picture I have in my mind, because it looks more like a tree, and the acacia tree is the basis of everything. I think there's a lot of symbolism one can get from that, rather than having a solid wooden structure. These boards were just covered with solid gold. This mercy seat, everything here was covered with gold, but this mercy seat was solid gold. That was the lid, and it had the cherubim on top of it with their wings, and the Shekinah glory was inside of that. Inside the ark, now Harry Whittaker makes quite a good argument that if you wanted to lift this lid of solid gold, you had to be very, very strong because gold is really heavy. So he actually reckons that there was a door, like a little cupboard, where the priest could either, get to, the high priest could get to these objects if they needed to. We had the tables of stone, which were smashed and made whole and then made again. We had the golden pot of manna with the manna inside that stayed fresh all the time. When the Israelites were in the wilderness, that manna kept going rotten if they took more than a day's supply. And we had Aaron's rod that budded. So something that was dead, that was made alive again. And the buds that came on there were almonds, blossoms, and almond fruit. So you can see all associated with resurrection, why the progression into the most holy place is talking about kingdom time. In Numbers 10 verse 33, we read that this ark was always carried on the shoulders of the priests, and when the pillar of cloud lifted, it showed God wanted the Israelite camp to move. This was the first thing that moved, and the priest would cover it with a blue cloth, go out of the camp and travel 3 days' journey to seek a new resting place. So there was always this 3 days, again, an interesting number to that, between when the Ark of the Covenant left the tabernacle to where it stopped, and then the rest of the Israelites caught up with them. It's nice, interesting stuff. It's like so much information that to try and get it into a quick study was really very challenging. Okay, so we've seen all the different implements and their symbolism. Let's have a look at the different colors and the metals that we used. So colors, we have white, which is associated with purity and righteousness. There's blue, which is always referring to heavenly. And in Numbers 15, the high priests and the priests are specifically instructed to put a ribbon of blue so that when they see the blue, they will remember God and his commandments. Purple is associated with royalty and riches, and we know how when Jesus was scourged and just before he was crucified, in Mark 15 verse 17 we read that they put a purple robe on him, mocking him to be the king of the Jews. And scarlet or red in Isaiah 1 verse 18, a very popular verse, though my sins be as scarlet. So scarlet always referring to mortality, to blood, and to death. And those are the colors that you will be picking up in the tabernacle all the time. As I also have been mentioning, there's the progression of the metals. So in the outer court, we have bronze or brass. This is not a precious metal. It was of the cheapest metals, common metals. And this is usually associated with human nature. And I'm sure most of you know 1 Samuel 17, old Goliath, who was just literally covered in bronze from top to toe. Then as we move into the holy place, we get silver coming in, and silver is the metal of atonement. They had to bring a shekel of silver, and it's also redemption money. That reference I give there in Matthew 26 is where Judas betrayed Jesus for 20 shekels of silver. And then we move into the most holy place, specifically where it's only gold metal, which is the most precious metal, and it refers to tried and perfected faith. And one of the other reasons why I believe the most holy place is referring to kingdom time. So that's our progress of our metals and the different colors that we used. Now, God was also very specific about how the tabernacle was carried. Now, this is in Numbers chapter 4. So you can see God is a God of order. He's not just all over the place. Not anyone can say, hey, I feel like carrying a board today, so I'll carry the board and you carry the tent. Specific people carry specific things. And in Numbers chapter 4, we read that the Kohathites, they would go in and they would cover the ark with the blue cloth, and they would put the staves into the different big implements. So your brazen altar, your incense altar, your Ark of the Covenant, table of showbread and your lampstand, that you never touched those. You carried them with the rods. Except, like now my question was how they carried the lampstand, because it doesn't talk about it being carried with rods. But they would pick it up, cover these all with blue cloths, and then carry that. So they would be the first to pack away their things. Then your Gershonites would come, and they would take down all the curtains and the coverings and the linen cloths, the linen sheets that were everywhere, anything that was hanging, and fold them up nicely, and that is what they carried. And look what they were given to transport them. A pair of ox carts, so they were given 2 ox carts to transport the curtains. Can you see we're moving from carrying to 2 pairs of ox carts? And then the tribe of Merari, they had the planks, the poles, the bases, the pins, any of the bulky things that were remained behind the pans and the shovels and the hard, heavy work, right? They got 4 ox carts to carry all their bulky material. So you can see God was very specific. And not just in who carried what, he was also very specific in how they now traveled through the wilderness. And this is in Numbers 7 and 10. Right in the front, you would have had the Ark of the Covenant covered in blue, 3 days' journey ahead. Then you had your 3 tribes that were on the east side, Issachar, Judah, and Zebulun. Then you would have your Levites, so Merari and Gershom would be over here with their oxen. And then you would have Reuben, Simeon, and Gad, which were on the north carrying. And then in between them, you would have your Levites carrying your sacred objects. So here would be your brazen altar, your lampstand, your table of showbread, and then you would have 6 tribes behind them as well. So you had 3 tabernacle, and then 6. So divided into 2 groups of 6. And there's a beautiful undesigned coincidence, and this is also one of my favorite studies. In Psalm 80, verse 1 and 2, it reads, and I mean, again, it just shows to me how true the Bible must be and have only one author, because it says there, give ear, O shepherd of Israel, thou that leadest Joseph like a flock, thou that dwellest between the cherubim, shine forth. Before Ephraim, Benjamin, and Manasseh, stir up your strength, come and save us. Why did he use the names Ephraim, Benjamin, and Manasseh? Because there's Ephraim, Benjamin, and Manasseh, and who would they see while they were traveling? They would be seeing the glory of God. So just like a little undesigned coincidence again, I mean, why were those 3 tribes mentioned? Why not Judah and Simeon or something more noticeable, more popular? And in Matthew 18, verse 20, there's that beautiful verse where 2 or 3 are gathered together in my name, there I am in the midst of them. God didn't say, okay, Levites, all of you are going to be here in the front. He was smack in the midst of everyone. Isn't it beautiful? It's just like such beautiful little coincidences. So let's look at the lessons for us. For the tabernacle to be established, God didn't order anyone to do anything. He said to everyone, you give willingly of what you have. And when God accepted that, it did this. Whether you brought brass, which was like common metal, it was just as good as you could have brought refined gold. If you just could bring goat's hair for the roughest skin, it could have been, in God's sight, it was as good as though you brought silk. So never underestimate what you have brought to God and to his service. That is emphasized in Corinthians. Let me quickly find Acts, Romans, Corinthians. Glad someone taught me that 66 book of the Bible song when I was young. But in 2 Corinthians 8, verse 12, it says to us, if there be first a willing mind, it is accepted according to that a man hath, and not according to what you do not have. And in the next chapter, in chapter 9, verse 7, it says, every man according as he purposes in his heart, so let him give, not grudgingly or of necessity, for God loves a cheerful giver. Beautiful thoughts, just from how the people were willing to give. I'll keep saying God is very specific and very detailed. He wants order. He wants harmony. So where people say, just give your heart to Christ and he will accept you. No, God, there's certain ways God wants to be approached and the way he wants to be worshipped and the way he wants reverence. And we need to find out exactly what he wants. He's very gracious. He's got a lot of mercy. He knows we're going to make mistakes, but he doesn't want us to make our own rules and decide what we feel is important. And this last part to me, I really thought was very precious. Like I showed with you, the different Levites were told to carry different things. And the tent pegs, the most unimportant and most boring thing to carry. I mean, I would rather carry the holy things, you know, the things that looked grand. But God says, you know what? He knows best. And all he wants us to do is to faithfully and joyfully carry out what God has assigned us to do according to our talents and according to our gifts. And do it to the best of our abilities so that we will always be giving him glory. So in our lives today, we must ask the question, if we were assigned the task of just being in charge of the tent pegs, would we have carried them well and to the best of our abilities without grudging or jealousy? And just knowing that whatever we were doing was to the honor and glory of God. Thank you.